Welcome to our Sunday worship service. My name is Sean. I'm one of the staff mentors for our college group at UC Irvine. Not the college pastor. Our college pastor is away at like a retreat/getaway this weekend with a handful of our staff members, but I have the privilege of being able to share from God's word today. So a story about this guy, okay? This is Jose Andres. The reason why I wanted to share about him is because he is a man who saw something that he could not unsee. And just the rest of his life was kind of transformed by what he saw. So Jose, he was born in July 1969 in Spain. At the age of 15, he enrolled in culinary school. And at the age of 21, he immigrated to the U.S. Okay, so he moved to New York, and he worked there as a cook, as a chef, at a popular restaurant, popular Spanish restaurant. And then from there, his career started to get established. Okay, so he went on to be the lead cook, chef in that restaurant. After that, he would kind of support and open up several new restaurants until he finally got his break. He opened up his own restaurant. And from there, he actually opened up several restaurants throughout the United States, big name cities like Miami, Los Angeles, Las Vegas. He opened up a restaurant in Puerto Rico. He became kind of like a known name in Spain, which starred on his own cooking show, was featured on TV, and so he kind of made it, so to speak. And then on January 12th, 2010, so this is 20 years after he immigrated to the United States, there was a 7.0 magnitude earthquake that hit the country of Haiti. And a lot of you guys might have heard about this. In the following 2 weeks, there was over 52 aftershocks that measured 4.5 or greater. And you'll see the epicenter is recently actually in Japan, there was an earthquake hit off the coast, but this was right kind of center. And so I won't go into a lot of the stats, but they're really sobering. It was really sad, actually, to read up on it a little bit more. The death toll, as well as kind of the subsequent damage to the country's infrastructure, and all of these things. And so not only was there kind of the initial impact, but then for weeks and for months after, the nation really struggled. And so it kind of became a global crisis in the sense that the global community really banded around the country of Haiti. And so Jose Andres, he went to Haiti, and he did whatever he could to support the aid efforts. And so in his own words, he said, when you need medical service, you bring doctors and nurses. When you need the rebuilding of infrastructure, you bring in engineers and architects. And if you have to feed people, you need professional chefs. Okay, and so he went to Haiti. He not only cooked, but he learned how locals would prepare their different dishes. He didn't want to just provide meals, but he wanted to listen and understand the culture. He wanted to cook alongside members of the community. And so this actually was the beginning of an organization, a nonprofit called the World Central Kitchen, which he founded with his wife, that dedicated, their mission is providing fresh meals, home-cooked meals, on the front lines of different humanitarian crises. In 2015, he was actually awarded the National Humanities Medal at a White House ceremony for his work with the WCK. More recently, 2 years after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the WCK and local partners had served over 260 million meals to families in need. Their organization has responded to other natural disasters, Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, the COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza. Even this past week, actually, I found out Hurricane Debbie made landfall in the southern U.S., and the WCK responded there as well. And so why am I sharing all of this with you? It's because Jose, his life was set. Okay, he was an immigrant, but he achieved the American dream. He made it until his eyes were opened to a greater need and a greater reality that he could not ignore, and the trajectory of his life was forever changed. And so today we're going to be studying a character in the Bible with a similar story, a foreigner who rose to power, who was shook by the core of what he saw. And so we're starting actually a new message series we're calling Rise Up and Build. It's a study through the book of Nehemiah. Today we'll be covering most of the first 2 chapters of Nehemiah, and then for our A2F group, we're going to probably be continuing this series right up until the summer evangelism training. So before we get started, just some overall context to the book of Nehemiah. So in our modern Bibles, it's actually separated as to 2 distinct books, and Nehemiah is sort of like the second half or the second part of what was originally one book, one narrative of Ezra and Nehemiah. Okay, those 2 books, I guess, split now. So Ezra and Nehemiah, it concerns the Israelites who were in exile in Babylon, their return to Jerusalem. Okay, and so 70 years of exile, that whole thing happens. Zerubbabel, we're not going to cover him, he returns with a group of Israelites to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. After that comes Ezra, about 60 years later. He teaches the Torah and kind of rebuilds the community around the temple. And then that is where the story of Nehemiah comes in. Okay, and so you have all of your passages printed out. What I wanted to do is just maybe with like one or two people around you, why don't you just go ahead and read the whole passage? Okay, so it ends in chapter 2, verse 16. You can read it out loud if you want. And when you're done reading, I would like you to just discuss maybe one of these questions. Okay, what sort of man is Nehemiah? Or what characteristics or qualities define him? Okay, so go ahead and read it together, and then I'll give you a couple minutes just to discuss this prompt. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into what this man Nehemiah was like. Nehemiah, maybe one of my favorite Old Testament characters to study. There's a lot that we could cover. There's just three features I wanted to highlight today about Nehemiah. With the help of ChatGPT, I got them to all start with the letter P, so I felt pretty proud of myself for that. Okay, so the three Ps of Nehemiah's response to the situation in Jerusalem. Okay, so the first P is that Nehemiah, he pursues knowledge. Okay, the other word I was thinking of is he probes. Okay, what do I mean by that? This guy Hanani and these other guys from Jerusalem, they come. I don't know how well these guys know each other. Okay, so maybe there's like some chit chat, like how's it going, whatever. And then in verse 2, Nehemiah asks concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. Okay, so these guys come and he says, hey, Jerusalem, our people, what's going on? And the situation is not good, right? There's great shame and trouble. The walls of Jerusalem are broken down. Its gates have been destroyed by fire, and this reality just wrecks Nehemiah. Later on in chapter 2, okay, so in chapter 1, he's in Babylon. In chapter 2, by this point in verse 11, he's now in Jerusalem, and we actually see him doing the same exact thing. He's pursuing knowledge, right? It says that, I'll just read this for us. So I went to Jerusalem. I was there 3 days. Then I rose in the night, I and a few men with me, and I told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. There is no animal with me, but the one on which I rode. I went out by night by the valley gate to the dragon spring, and then to the dung gate, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down, and the gates, and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. So it's the exact same language. Hanani had described the situation of Jerusalem in chapter 1. Now Nehemiah is there, and he's there to see it for himself with his own eyes. Then I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal that was under me to pass. Then I went up in the night by the valley and inspected the wall. And I turned back and entered by the valley gate and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest who were to do the work. Okay, so what is Nehemiah doing? He's pursuing knowledge, right? He's inspecting. He walks along the walls. He sees the damage and the disrepair with his own eyes. This interesting detail, he didn't tell anybody what God had put on his heart. I think it tells us that he's not simply like in planning mode, right? He's not like looking like, okay, like what's the work we got cut out for us? How are we going to do this whole thing? The fact that he's going out there at night, it's kind of this somber sort of picture, I think that's described. I imagine him maybe even like running his hands alongside the stones that had once formed this wall of this great city, and now it's just kind of a heel of rubble. And I imagine he's maybe considering what Jerusalem once was. Maybe he's imagining what it could have looked like instead of just what's right in front of him. Nehemiah's question, like what's going on in Jerusalem, his desire to know, his desire to see for himself, I think it's worth pausing. The fact that Nehemiah would go out of his way to pursue this kind of knowledge because Nehemiah is not from Jerusalem. He's not from Jerusalem. These people, they've been in exile for 70 years. Nehemiah, he's born in exile. Okay, Jerusalem isn't his hometown. He's probably heard of it. He's probably never been there. This is probably his first time seeing it, right? Jerusalem is not his city. Babylon is his city. And then notice also we get this interesting detail in chapter 1, verse 11. Now I was cupbearer to the king. And I think this is significant too. So cupbearer, what's a cupbearer? A lot of times when we think about that, we just think of a servant. They kind of just like, you stand there and like there's like a platter and like this nice little chalice, and then the king, as he's doing his important king stuff, he grabs the drink. But a cupbearer was actually an incredibly important position because he's serving drinks to royalty. And part of his duty was he's going to check to verify that there's no poison in the drink. Okay, so if you're going to, those like political intrigue, whatever movies, and then they try to assassinate the guy with poison. So he would have actually had to verify that this is safe for the king to drink. And so in order to be a cupbearer, you actually had to be incredibly highly trusted, influential. You're probably actually present when a lot of important matters are being discussed. He probably lived in the palace as a foreigner. All right, so Nehemiah, an exile in a foreign nation, now he's cupbearer to the king of the entire nation of Babylon. Right, so he achieved the Babylonian dream. Right? He's in exile, he's in a position of power and status, wealth and comfort. And then Hanani and these guys come along, and the first thing he does is he says, what's going on in Jerusalem? Right? He doesn't allow all the nice things that he's got going for him to blind him from the reality of the suffering and the difficulty of his own people. And in fact, when he asks, I think he knows he's actually inviting bad news and discomfort and disruption into his life. Right? He's inviting his world to get turned upside down by the answer, because once he saw what was happening in Jerusalem, he could not unsee it. Right? His entire life, actually, from this point on, becomes about repairing what was broken down in Jerusalem, both the physical walls as well as, as we study more of Nehemiah, it's also broken down in the people's hearts, right, and in their relationship with God. I think for us, we need to appreciate that all of us similarly live in a position of power and status and wealth and comfort. I know we have some visitors, okay, so let me speak to the Irvine folks for a little bit. Irvine, okay, let's be real, man. This place is nice. Actually, I heard there's a couple visitors from Davis. Davis is really nice too, actually. I heard it rivals Irvine in how nice it is. Riverside, you guys still got it good, okay? The houses are a lot bigger and they're a lot cheaper. Okay, so all of us in our own way, we have our good stuff. Irvine, like the weather is good. Okay, I know it's hot for us here, but come on, it's not that hot. The streets are smooth. It's always well paved. There's no litter. There are no pigeons in Irvine. I don't know if you've realized that. It took me 2 years to realize I haven't seen a pigeon in a long time. It's because there's no trash. There's no gum on the sidewalk. Okay, everything is pristine and clear. A couple of years ago, we went to LA. We were helping some of our LA staff. They're moving into a new apartment, and so we just went to kind of help them out. It was in like the heart of Koreatown, and so we brought our kids with us. Elise was maybe 4 or something, and so we were walking around, and then she tripped, and then she almost face planted, like in the concrete. It's like, well, what happened? So it turns out that, like, when tree roots, like when they kind of break through the concrete, and then it does that little thing there, and it occurred to me, my child, who has been born and raised in the city of Irvine, has never walked on a concrete surface that is not just perfectly smooth with no cracks. Okay, that is the city that we live in. Okay, just to drive this point home, because I found a couple pictures that I personally took. These are straight from my phone that I found in Irvine, okay? Check out this left one. This is the fortune cookie. Even the fortune cookies are telling me I'm going to have a comfortable life here in Irvine. There's a Chinese restaurant, and then this license plate is absurd. I was driving, so I had to quickly, I was at a red light. Okay, I was at a red light, but it made me crack up. So Irvine, minutes from everywhere, but close to perfect. That is so true. Even most of this group here, okay, we're college educated, or we're working towards our college degree. I know some of you guys in here, you're job searching. Even if you're job searching, okay, you have a nice house or a nice apartment. You have AC. You have roommates that are going to take care of you when you're sick. You have 3 Costco's, 2 99 Ranches, 2 H Marts, and 5 Targets, all within like a 15-minute drive of where you live. We live, I think, in a modern-day Babylon. Okay, we are royalty compared to most of the rest of the world, and I wonder, in the midst of that, if we're able to do what Nehemiah did, which is to pursue knowledge. It's to not be blinded by the nice things, to ask about what's broken down in our society, what's broken down in people around us. It's to see the world the way that it really is, and to allow that to wreck our hearts. I think to pursue this kind of knowledge, it's actually to share in the very heart of God. So we've been going through Exodus in our DTs, and we see this, Exodus 3. Verses 7-9, then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. I know their sufferings. I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Right? Verse 9, he says, and now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Right? This is God's heart. He sees, he hears, and he notices, and we are called to share in God's heart, right? To see what God sees, to hear what he hears. So let's get practical. Okay, so what does it look like to pursue knowledge like this? In our relationships, either with our friends or our housemates, I think it's to ask intentional questions, right? To not keep it surface level and just ask, like all of us have done this before, like, oh, how's it going? And you're not actually interested in how's it going. It's just sort of this phrase that you say when you see people, but to ask intentionally, how are things going for you? With each of the people you live with, I think one measure of if you pursue knowledge or not is to ask intentional questions about what's going on. Maybe prayer requests, right? Like, do you know what your housemate's prayer request would be this week, or a friend, or even a family member? When's the last time that you asked that sincerely? Do you know how they would answer this question, what is difficult or burdensome in their lives these days? A lot of times I think we tend to just focus on what's difficult or burdensome in our own lives, right? And I think we're too busy or too distracted to notice that in another person. Do you notice when people look down? Maybe they're like, I don't know, extra snappy at you. And rather than moving towards that, you're like, I'm not going to talk to that guy today. Maybe at the end of the day, they just let out a long sigh. Do you notice that? Do you move towards that situation? Do you ask, like, hey, is everything okay? Do you need to talk? Guys, we're really bad at this, especially guys who is like, just give him some space, let him figure out his thing. But do you know how to move towards a situation like that? A lot of us affiliated with the college campus, either as a student or as a campus minister, do you know the present reality on the college campus? Have you pursued, that kind of knowledge? I think a lot of this, a lot of these stats we're familiar with, but I wanted to kind of cover some of them again. In 2022, they conducted a survey of over 100 college campuses. 44% of students reported symptoms of depression. Okay, that's almost 1 out of every 2 students on a college campus. 15% reported seriously considering suicide in the past year. In a Gallup study on loneliness, 39% of students surveyed said they felt lonely literally the day before they took it, right? So 39% of the people said, yesterday I felt lonely. Going beyond just the college campus, 73% of working adults aged 18 to 22, so it's actually still the college demographic, it's just people who are working, report sometimes or always feeling alone 73% of the time. Or I guess 73% of people. That rate is up 69% from last year. So that growth is explosive. That growth rate is explosive. 1 in 5 college women. This statistic, it blows my mind, and this has been true year after year after year. Every time they run a study like this, the rate is always the same. 1 in 5 college women experience sexual assault during their time in college, majority of which involve alcohol or substance abuse. That's the reality of the college campus. And again, it's not that we don't know. So when I say pursue knowledge, it's not just intellectual knowledge. It's not just facts that we're trying to get, but I guess to allow it to wreck us, to stare, human brokenness right in front of us, and to just, take it in, recognize it for what it is. A few weeks ago, we heard from Greg Steer, founder of Dare to Share Ministries, and he shared this memorable story of when his youth pastor, he challenged him, his youth pastor, so Greg, he's a teenager, he challenged him to go to a local mall, to sit down for 30 minutes, and to just look at people passing him by, and to imagine that each person had a sign on their forehead that said, bound for hell. And he said he just wept when he thought about that reality. That is the spiritual reality of the world that we're living in. Nehemiah was a man who knew how to move towards that. And God, he calls us to do the same. And so before we move on, I want to give us all a chance to just do a little self-assessment, if you will. How are you doing in this area of pursuing knowledge? In your relationships, maybe in how you see your workplace or your campus, your coworkers or your classmates. Are you someone who knows how to move towards finding out more. And even if it's bad news, actually, especially if it's bad news, are you able to move towards a situation like that? Or are you caught up maybe in the nice things of life, that you don't see the reality of the broken down walls all around us? So just want to give you a chance to, I don't know, just think about that for yourself. Maybe if there is a specific situation or a specific person that comes to mind, like how did you respond most recently? So if you have a paper, you can write, but maybe just for like 30 seconds, I want you to just think about where you would place yourself. I promise the others are going to go faster. So Nehemiah, he asks about Jerusalem. Okay, he finds out. And then what do we see? In verse 4, it says, as soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And so our second P is prayer. Okay, Nehemiah, he receives the news, and then he's driven to prayer. Right? It says weeping and mourning, fasting and praying, and I think the obvious question then we should ask is, when was the last time that we've personally responded in prayer this way, when we found out, some form of difficult news? I think the reality is we live in a really harried environment, right? We're always distracted. We're always running from one thing to the next. We always have our devices with us, right? It's almost like automatic. We pull it out, and we distract ourselves. Sometimes I wonder if we've lost the art of, the ability to just sit down, right, to slow down and to just weep and to just pray, for what's broken. I know I'm guilty of this, right? I'll receive a prayer request. I'll see it in my email inbox, or I'll get a text message, and there's always a temptation. I'll come back to this because this is kind of heavy. This news that I just got, and I'm in the middle of something right now, and when I'm ready to press pause on whatever it is that I happen to be doing, when I have the space to actually soak in what this is telling me, then I'll go back and I'll do it. Right? There's always that temptation. But right now is not the time. I can't give it the proper attention, so I need some space. Can you relate to something like this? There's something in our society that has really trained us to be constantly distracted, constantly entertained, that sometimes we can't just sit down and just absorb difficult news. Right? We need to find a place to just kind of click away, or to numb the sadness a little bit, to go to a place where we don't need to be reminded of everything that's broken in our world or that's broken inside of us. I think we've been trained to check out rather than to respond in prayer. No one likes to be reminded that this world is broken, that there's death or cancer or adultery. There's broken families, there's our own personal sins and issues, right? Our irritation, our self-righteousness, our anger, our lust, our impatience towards those we care about, our selfish use of our time and our resources. These things ought to drive us to prayer, but oftentimes it makes us want to just look the other way. The other way we can respond, I think, is, and I tend to do this too, is, there's a problem, boom, let's fix it. Right? There's something broken. I have a solution for that. And we're quick to jump straight into, what's the resolution? I know many of us, we've been thinking about and kind of planning towards the fall quarter. So for those who are affiliated with the college campus, orientation has been going on. There's hundreds of students that are on campus. And so as a church, we've been out there flyering, tabling, trying to meet new students, hosting virtual webinars, posting on IG, got to make our group look happening and attractive. And I think that's really good. It's really good, but I wonder how much of that work is first driven by prayer, right? Not just kind of launching out and doing a bunch of work, but starting first with the heart and an attitude of prayer. So if you read actually Nehemiah's chapter 1, verse 1, and chapter 2, verse 1, we get this interesting insight. So verse 1 of chapter 1, it says, "Now it happened in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year." And then in chapter 2, this is when he's actually in front of the king and he shares, all that's going on in his mind. It says it's the month of Nisan. Okay, and that's, I think the author goes out of the way to distinguish those two times. And it's because that gap between those 2 months, it turns out to actually be a period of about 4 months. It's 4 months when he first finds out news about Jerusalem, and then he actually speaks to the king. And in verse 6, we get this, "Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant, that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants." Right? So day and night, 4 months, he's praying. Okay, so if you're a student, I guess you don't have to be a student, but UCI graduations this past year, that was June 17th. That was the last graduation. I looked it up. Move-in weekend, that's September 20th. Okay, so that's 3 months and 3 days, class, good. So imagine praying every single day and night for the broken down walls of the college campus from the day that graduation ended until the day that freshmen move in, and then you tack another month onto that, and that is the length of prayer that Nehemiah has engaged in this whole situation in Jerusalem. We're in the summer. We have about another month and a half before the fall quarter hits, right? Welcome week, it's going to be busy. How do we want to spend the next 1.5 months? And I was thinking one thing we can do, one thing we have to do is we have to pray, right? We have to pray for our campus. We have to pray for people we haven't met yet. We have to pray for those who are needy and are broken. They're out there. We haven't met them yet. Maybe they don't even know the situation that they're in, but we can pray, right? So how is your prayer life, right? Do you know how to pray like Nehemiah prayed? Not the prayer like right before you eat, okay? Again, I'm guilty of this. Like, there's stuff you should have been praying about, and now it's like, okay, but I got to pray before I eat. And then you kind of stuff like all this stuff you're supposed to be praying about like throughout the day into your one prayer before your meal. So I've done that before. There's an event maybe that's about to start, and it's like, oh shoot, like I should probably like have God bless this event. And so you like do a quick like, aerial prayer for the whole event, like God's gonna, sprinkle blessings on you. So I'm not talking about those kind of prayers, okay? Daily prayer, desperate prayer, sustained prayer. 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be like this lengthy time, but to know how to carve out time to pray to God. Specifically intercessory prayer, but it doesn't have to be just that, right? So there's burdens, about other people, but it could be burdens, in your own life, but just knowing how to connect with God in prayer on a regular basis. Again, back to the first point, right? To pray that you would see what God sees and to hear what God hears. And so, I have the last point, but at the end of the message, I wanted to give us a chance to pray, just in response to all that kind of is being stirred up through Nehemiah. So prayer, okay? Nehemiah is someone who prays. The final P is plan, okay? So we got pursue knowledge, we have prayer, and then Nehemiah is someone who knows how to plan, okay? So we're going to pray. September 20th rolls around, welcome week. We don't want to find ourselves without a plan. Okay, let's say you have non-Christian family members that you've been praying for, right? I want to be able to share the gospel with them. Finally you have a meal with them, or it's like it's Father's Day, it's a significant event, or like you have a family trip going on, and so you're finally there, and you don't have a plan as to how you're going to share the gospel, or how you can love them, or how you can, show them how much you appreciate about them, right? So yes, we need to pray, but we also need a plan. Okay, so we see that in Nehemiah chapter 2. I won't read this. You guys all read this before, but it's funny. So actually, you do get this last-minute prayer. So Nehemiah does throw up last-minute prayers too. Those are totally legitimate. God hears those prayers. So in verse 4, the king says, "What are you requesting?" And then Nehemiah so I prayed to the God of heaven. And then he goes into his plan. And Nehemiah has been planning. Okay, so the king says, "Hey, how long are you going to be gone?" Nehemiah has an answer for him. "It's going to take me this long." Okay, so well, what do you need? He says, okay, well, I need letters. I need letters from the governor, right? That's for safe passage. He needs a trip back to Judah. It needs to be safe. And so he's not only requesting protection in the form of a letter, but he's probably requesting some form of military protection as they traveled. So soldiers and horses, and I don't know what kind of entourage he had with them. He asked for letters for timber. Okay, so he knows what timber is going to be used for. And this is not a small amount of timber, by the way. He's talking about timber that's going to be used for the gates, the walls. And the home that he's going to be living in, I don't think he was setting up a fancy house for himself, but he knows, right? He's got it all laid out, his plan. He's probably thinking there's going to be construction on this part. So he's probably thinking HR, I know how many people I need. I'm going to have a team of people doing this. I'm going to have a team of people doing that. And so again, Nehemiah is a planner. Okay, so he's praying, okay, but he's also planning. And again, I think we find ourselves in a similar kind of situation. It's summertime. Okay, summertime is typically associated with like it's chill, finally I have some breaks. It is, I really love the summer. Actually, it's a time to build into our relationships and all those things. I think it's also a perfect time to be drafting up plans. How do I want to approach this new school year? Right? Once things get busy, what plans do I need in place to prioritize my time with God, or to prioritize my relationships, or to not, cut corners just so that I can advance myself personally? It's plans on how we're going to reach out to this campus. How can we meet people in the first 72 hours when they first get here? Again, a lot of times it's easy to relax. I think we get this exhortation in Ephesians 5. Apostle Paul says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Right, so when you have free time, right, when there's nothing immediately in front of you that you have to do, where do your thoughts go? Right, what do you do with that free time? I'm bored, right? What's the next thing I can do to entertain myself, right? Or are you scheming? I love that word when it's used right. Are you drafting up plans for how you can love God and love people? I know some of you guys out there, you are not planners. I was by default not a planner. Okay, I like to be spontaneous. I've become a better planner, but I have like a willpower battery, and after a certain amount of time, I look at a Google Doc for too long, and everything just blurs. Or if you're younger, okay, maybe you are guilty of this. Someone older will tell me what the plan is, so I just need to show up and they'll tell me what I need to do. Okay, no, we need a plan. Okay, we need to think, love is all about the details. When I proposed to my wife, I had a plan, okay? I actually made a video, okay? So if you want to find out how I did that, you can ask later, but what are we going to do for food? We were a long distance, so I had to actually borrow someone's car, so I asked them in advance, can I borrow your car? We're going to meet here, and I had the whole thing laid out, okay? When there is love involved, planning is a beautiful thing. It's appropriate, okay? And so you can see a problem. It can wreck your heart, but you will be limited in your ability to love or to move towards people or situations if you don't take the time or if you don't know how to put forward the mental effort of how to plan. Okay, so Nehemiah, he pursues knowledge, he prays, and he has a plan. And as we wrap up, I wanted to give us all just a chance to respond. So actually, if we could dim the lights, and I wanted to actually invite you guys to stand. Feel free to spread out. I just want to give us a chance to pray. Just pray in response to God's word. Of these three areas of Nehemiah, which of these feels difficult for you? All right? Is it pursuing knowledge? Do you avoid maybe wanting to see difficult situations in your life or in others? Do you fall short of moving towards people? Right? Asking, what's going on in your life? What's been difficult lately? Are you caught up in the nice things of life, maybe, that you don't see the broken down walls all around you? Is it prayer, right? Is prayer something you need to commit to right now, that you want to seek God in regular prayer, throughout the week? Prayer, it's physical. It takes some effort. So to enter into prayer with a posture of really wanting to connect with God, really wanting to experience God's heart. If you don't pray audibly, I want to actually encourage you, challenge you to pray audibly, to actually speak words. I think there's something very powerful about that. It actually forces you to engage your mind in some ways. Pray with passion. I don't know. That's something I've been trying to do more lately. I'm not naturally a passionate person, but when you pray, to actually pray desperate prayers, not just to speak the words, but to cry out prayers, to engage your mind and your heart. Is there a specific burden maybe that's on your heart that God is inviting you to lift up in prayer? Or is it in planning, right? There's some situation you need to move towards and you need wisdom from God. How do I address this situation? What can I do to be creative and to be detailed in love and in moving towards that situation? Is there someone you need to commit to? Thinking through and planning in order to love them. So if I can invite us all to stand, I just want to pray to close, just however God spoke to you. Let's pray in response, and then we'll end with our closing song. Okay, let's pray.